everyone, welcome back to Speak Up. In today's podcast, we'll be diving into a topic that every English learner faces at some point: how to memorize new words smartly. If you've ever struggled with remembering vocabulary or finding yourself forgetting words right after learning them, don't worry, you're not alone. Whether you're a beginner or looking to improve your English fluency, the good news is that there are effective strategies out there that can make learning new words much easier. You know, the challenge of memorizing vocabulary is something that often hinders people from speaking English confidently. But what if I told you that with the right techniques, you can not only memorize new words, but also use them in your daily English conversations? It's all about making those words stick in a way that feels natural and easy. We're going to cover several smart methods today that will help you improve your English listening practice, speak English fluently, and even master those advanced words that can sometimes feel intimidating. So let's get right into it.
Exactly, Ryan. And speaking of improving English fluency, this is something that many learners struggle with. You might know a lot of words, but feel like you're unable to use them when speaking or listening. And this is where memorizing new words the right way becomes really crucial. Learn English while listening, as it can help you absorb vocabulary in a way that feels more intuitive, rather than just memorizing words in isolation. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can I make these words stick in my mind and recall them when I need them? It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. The key is not just repeating words over and over, but understanding how they fit into the bigger picture. Real-life English conversations are a great way to practice because hearing and using new vocabulary in context makes it easier to remember. And of course, as we go through today's podcast, we'll introduce techniques that will help you improve your English speaking practice and give you the confidence to use new vocabulary in any situation. So, let's make sure you're equipped with smart strategies that work. And by the end of this episode, you'll be able to speak English with confidence.
All right, so now that we've discussed how to memorize new words smartly, let's talk about why it's so important in the first place. A strong vocabulary is essential for clear communication in English. Think about it. When you're trying to express an idea, the more words you know, the easier it becomes to say exactly what you mean. You can paint a clearer picture, and your message won't get lost in translation. Imagine trying to explain something complex with only a few basic words. It's like trying to build a house with just a hammer, but with a broader vocabulary, you have more tools at your disposal. It helps you articulate your thoughts, making communication smoother and more effective. This is a key aspect of improving English fluency. The more words you have, the more confident and precise you become when speaking.
Exactly, Ryan. And it's not just about sounding smart. It's about effective communication. When you have a larger vocabulary, you're able to understand others better too. Imagine listening to a podcast or having a conversation where the speaker uses words you're unfamiliar with. You might miss the meaning of their point, and it can interrupt the flow of understanding. However, when you're familiar with a wide range of words, you don't just hear them. You understand them in context. This enhances your English listening practice because the more words you know, the more you can absorb from conversations, podcasts, or movies in English. It's a cycle. The more you learn, the more you can listen and comprehend, and the more you can use those words in your own speaking.
And it doesn't stop there. When we talk about speaking English fluently, it all ties back to vocabulary. The more words you know, the more flexible you become in conversations. You'll notice that when you know how to express yourself with different words, you won't feel stuck when you're speaking. This is a huge part of speaking with confidence. It's about having the right words ready in your mind so you can engage in real-life English conversations without hesitation. Vocabulary isn't just about memorizing words. It's about using them in real conversations, whether that's with friends, colleagues, or even strangers. So, building your vocabulary is essential for not just understanding English better, but also for participating in conversations more naturally.
Right. And let's not forget about how this plays into practicing English listening skills. As you build your vocabulary, you'll start to notice that you can follow along with conversations more easily. This is because you're familiar with more words and phrases, so your brain doesn't need to work as hard to process unfamiliar terms. And when you're listening to English, whether it's in a movie, a podcast, or a conversation with native speakers, you'll be able to catch more of what's being said. Plus, as you hear new words in context, it'll help reinforce your memory of them, so you'll be able to use them in your own speaking as well. It's all connected. Learning English while listening helps with both understanding and speaking.
All right, let's dive into one of the most effective techniques for memorizing new words: learning words in context. This is an approach that many learners overlook, but it's incredibly powerful. The key here is to understand that vocabulary isn't just a list of random words. To truly learn English fluently, you need to see how those words function in real sentences and real conversations. For example, let's take the word determine. If you just memorize the definition, you might understand it, but you won't be able to use it confidently in conversation. However, if you learn the word in context, like in the sentence, "I need to determine the best time to schedule the meeting," you start seeing how it fits in real-life English conversations. The more you expose yourself to words used in context, the more naturally they'll come to you in English conversations. This also helps you understand nuances in meaning, which will ultimately make you sound more fluent.
Exactly, Ryan. And using context doesn't just mean reading or hearing the word in a sentence once. To really make it stick, you need to hear it multiple times, in different contexts. For example, let's say you're learning a word like harmony. If you read it in a sentence like, "The band played in perfect harmony," you get a sense of what the word means. But if you hear it in different contexts, like in a conversation about how to speak English fluently or discussing teamwork at work, you begin to see its multiple uses, and it becomes easier to remember. This is why real-life English conversations are so helpful. They give you a chance to hear words used naturally, and you start learning their different meanings depending on the situation. As you continue engaging in these conversations, you'll naturally get better at understanding and using those words in your own speech.
Exactly, Priya. And one great thing about this is that it ties into English conversation topics for beginners. When you learn new words in context, you're not just memorizing vocabulary, you're preparing yourself for actual conversations. Let's say you're a beginner, and you've just learned words like gather, celebrate, or share. If you learn these words through daily English conversations, you can immediately start applying them in casual discussions. This will help you feel more confident when speaking English because you're not just thinking about the words, you're thinking about how to use them in real situations. And when you practice this regularly, you'll notice your English speaking practice becomes more fluid and natural.
And that brings us back to fluency. Using words in context helps you use them more naturally, without having to stop and think too much. You'll begin to speak English fluently because you'll have already practiced those words in real conversations. The more you engage in English listening practice and use words in various contexts, the more they will become second nature to you.
So, the key takeaway here is that learning new words through context is essential. It's not just about memorizing vocabulary, it's about learning English through listening and speaking, so the words you learn become part of your active language skills. Whether you're a beginner or advanced, context-based learning is one of the best ways to ensure that vocabulary sticks with you and becomes useful in daily conversations.
Now, let's talk about another highly effective technique for memorizing new words: the association method. This technique works by linking the new word with something you already know, whether it's an image, a sound, or even an emotion. The more personal and vivid the connection, the stronger the memory becomes. For example, imagine you're learning the word eager. To remember this word, you could associate it with a strong image of someone excited to start a new job or someone waiting anxiously for a gift. The visual image of someone eagerly anticipating something creates a lasting memory because it's connected to something emotionally meaningful. Whenever you think of the word eager, you'll remember that image or feeling, making it much easier to recall in a conversation.
Exactly, Priya. And this association technique works great with idioms and phrases too. Let's take a common idiom like kick the bucket. Now, we all know this means to die. But let's think about how the phrase itself can be memorable. If you imagine someone kicking a bucket as a metaphor for the end of something, it makes the phrase stick in your mind because it's not just about the words, but about the vivid image it creates. These kinds of associations help us remember vocabulary in a more real-life context. By linking words to emotions or images, you're essentially creating a mental map. So when you're engaged in real-life English conversations, you can pull up these memories and use the words in context without thinking twice. The more fun and engaging the association, the easier it is to recall the word later when you need it.
Another great way to use associations is through sounds. For instance, let's say you're learning the word buzz. You can associate it with the sound of a bee, or even the buzz of a phone when it rings. Associating the word with the sound it represents can make it more memorable. This technique helps especially with words that describe sounds or actions. Over time, you'll naturally make these connections, and your vocabulary will grow more solid.
Right. And one more thing I'd like to add here, using idioms and phrases in daily conversations is a smart way to cement these associations. For instance, when you hear someone say, "I'm feeling under the weather," to mean they're sick, you'll know exactly what it means, even though it doesn't literally relate to weather. The more often you hear and use idioms like this, the more natural they'll feel when you're speaking English fluently. And by using these phrases in real-life English conversations, you're making the words and their meaning stick for the long term.
So, the key here is that by associating new words with familiar images, sounds, or emotions, you make them more memorable and easier to recall when you need them. This technique not only improves your English speaking practice, but it also helps you retain words in a way that feels natural and connected to your life. Now, let's move on to a powerful technique that has helped many learners improve their vocabulary: visualization. This is all about creating mental images to associate with new words. The idea is simple. The more vivid and detailed the image, the stronger the word will stick in your memory. Our brains are naturally wired to remember images and stories more easily than just abstract words. When you create a mental picture, you're making the word come alive in your mind, and that makes it much easier to recall later.
Exactly, Priya. Visualization isn't just about thinking of an image. It's about making it as real-life and dynamic as possible. For example, if you're learning the word mountain, instead of just picturing a generic mountain, think of a specific mountain you've seen, like a huge snow-capped peak that you once hiked. You could imagine the sound of your footsteps on the path, the cold wind and the fresh air. All these elements together make the image so much more memorable.
And the best part about this is you can create short stories around the words you're learning. Let's take the word adventure. Instead of just memorizing the word itself, you can build a little narrative around it. Picture yourself embarking on an adventure, climbing mountains, crossing rivers, meeting people from different cultures, and learning new things along the way. By weaving the word into a story, you not only solidify your understanding of its meaning, but also give it emotional weight, which makes it easier to recall when you need it.
That's right. And visualization is especially helpful when you're trying to speak English fluently or during real-life English conversations. For instance, if you're talking about your recent trip to the beach and you visualize the sand, waves, and the sunshine, it becomes a lot easier to use descriptive words that will impress your listener. The more vivid the story, the more powerful the memory of the word.
Also, don't just visualize the word itself, but how you would use it in a real-life context. For instance, when you learn the word ambitious, create a mental image of someone striving to reach a challenging goal, like a person working late into the night to finish a project. This not only helps you remember the word, but also gives you a practical example of how to use it in conversation. The next time you're discussing someone's goals or aspirations, the word ambitious will come naturally.
And here's a little tip for you. The more emotionally engaging your visualization, the better it will stick. Words are often tied to emotions, so when you tie those emotions to the image, it adds an extra layer of depth. For example, think about the word joyful. Instead of just picturing someone smiling, imagine someone laughing with friends during a celebration, feeling absolutely happy and free. This emotional connection will help you recall the word with more clarity when you need it.
Visualization can also tie into learning advanced English vocabulary. For example, let's say you're trying to learn the word perplexed. You could imagine someone in a difficult situation, perhaps a friend who's completely confused by a complicated puzzle. The mental image will help you remember the meaning of the word perplexed, and when you need it in conversation, you can easily recall the situation or emotion that goes with it.
Now let's dive into one of the most effective techniques to help you memorize new words: repetition. Repeating a word multiple times is one of the best ways to lock it into your long-term memory. Think about it this way. The more times you hear or use a word, the stronger the neural connections in your brain become, making it easier for you to recall the word later. Whether you're practicing English listening or English speaking practice, repetition helps solidify the word in your memory.
Absolutely, Ryan. But repetition alone can sometimes lead to forgetting, especially when you're learning a large number of words. That's where spaced repetition comes into play. This method is designed to optimize the intervals at which you review words to make sure you remember them over the long term. For example, you might review a word after 1 day, then 3 days, then a week, and so on. This strategy ensures that you reinforce the word just before you're about to forget it, which dramatically boosts your retention rate.
One tool that can help you implement spaced repetition effectively is Anki. It's a flashcard app that uses this method to make sure you're reviewing words at the perfect intervals. You can create digital flashcards for any vocabulary you want to learn, and the app will schedule them based on how well you know each word. If you struggle with a word, it will show up more frequently. If you get it right, it will be spaced out further until it's deeply ingrained in your memory.
That's a great tip, Ryan. And the beauty of spaced repetition is that it works not just for memorizing individual words, but also for real-life English conversations. Let's say you're learning new phrases or idioms like break the ice or a piece of cake. Using spaced repetition, you'll review these expressions at the right intervals, ensuring that you don't forget them when you need to use them in a conversation.
Right. And here's the key. Repetition is not just about repeating words. It's about integrating them into daily English conversations. The more you hear a word in context and use it, the more it will stick in your mind. You could also practice English listening skills by listening to podcasts or videos in English. As you repeat the words you hear, it will become second nature to use them in your own conversations.
Another thing to keep in mind is that repetition should be active. Don't just repeat words passively by reading flashcards. Try saying them out loud, writing sentences with them, and using them in real conversations. This helps you improve your English speaking fluency, and it connects your memory with the physical action of speaking. Plus, it's a great way to practice English with native speakers because it helps you build confidence in using the words in real-life situations.
Exactly. So, to recap, repetition and spaced repetition are essential tools for expanding your vocabulary and improving your English fluency. If you want to take it a step further, consider using spaced repetition software like Anki. But always remember, repetition doesn't mean just repeating a word. It means reinforcing it in a variety of contexts so that it becomes a natural part of your vocabulary. One of the most powerful ways to memorize new words is to actively use the word in sentences. It's not enough to just know the meaning of a word. You need to be able to use it naturally in conversation. When you put a word into a sentence, you're not just memorizing a list. You're applying the word in a meaningful context. This helps you understand how the word functions and allows you to use it correctly in different situations.
Exactly, Ryan. For example, if you're learning the word collaborate, don't just think about its definition. Instead, try saying something like, "In my last project, I had to collaborate with my team to finish the task on time." By using the word in a sentence, you're connecting it to a real-life situation. This makes it more memorable and helps you retain the word much more effectively.
Absolutely. And the best part is, once you start practicing English with native speakers, you get a chance to use these words in real-life English conversations. Imagine you're in a conversation where you need to express an idea, and suddenly, the word you learned fits perfectly into your sentence. You'll feel more confident because you've already practiced using the word in context.
Right. The key here is confidence. A lot of learners struggle with speaking fluently because they fear making mistakes. But by practicing using new words and sentences, you not only memorize them better, but also gain the confidence to speak English fluently. So, whenever you learn a new word, try to use it in a sentence right away. It could be in your journal, with a friend, or in a business English conversation if you're working in a professional setting.
And don't just stop there. Think about the context in which you're using the word. If you're preparing for something like an English job interview, it's helpful to practice business English conversations that include those new words. By using the word in a relevant setting, you make it even more likely that you'll remember it and use it correctly when the time comes.
Absolutely. One of the best ways to improve English communication skills is by engaging in real conversations to learn English. Practice makes perfect. And the more you practice using words and sentences, especially in real conversations, the better your speaking skills will become. This method helps you become more comfortable with speaking English, which ultimately leads to better English speaking fluency.
So, let's wrap this up. The bottom line is that using words and sentences, especially in daily English conversations, is one of the most effective ways to solidify your vocabulary. And by doing so, you're not only improving your vocabulary, but also boosting your confidence and fluency in real-life situations. Whether you're speaking with native speakers or practicing alone, keep using new words in meaningful ways, and you'll see tremendous improvement. Now let's talk about how listening to English conversations can be a powerful tool for vocabulary retention. A lot of learners focus on reading or writing, but listening to real conversations to learn English is just as important. When you listen to podcasts or conversations, you're exposed to new words in context. You get to hear how native speakers use words naturally, which helps you understand their meaning and usage.
Exactly, Ryan. Listening to English conversations for beginners might seem challenging at first, but it's one of the best ways to absorb new vocabulary. For example, when you hear a word used in a podcast, you're not just hearing the definition. You're also hearing it used in a sentence, which gives you a deeper understanding of how to use it. So, try to listen to podcasts or English conversation topics for beginners to hear words in action.
Yes. And by listening to how native speakers use words in various contexts, you also improve your English pronunciation skills. You'll start to pick up on subtle nuances, like how certain words are stressed or pronounced differently in certain situations. This can really help you speak English with confidence because you'll know not only what a word means, but also how to pronounce it correctly and use it naturally.
Great point, Ryan. It's all about getting comfortable with the flow of the language. When you listen to real-life conversations, you get a sense of how the language feels. It's not just about memorizing words, it's about absorbing the rhythm and intonation. For instance, when you hear a native speaker using an idiom or a slang word, you're not just learning the word. You're learning how it fits into a conversation. So, make it a habit to listen to podcasts for English pronunciation practice, or even better, to real conversations where you can hear people speak naturally.
Exactly. And this also ties into another great technique for learning vocabulary: listening to English conversations for beginners that are specifically designed for learners. These podcasts and conversations are often slower and clearer, which gives you time to catch the words and phrases used. As you become more comfortable, you can move on to faster conversations, improving both your listening skills and vocabulary retention at the same time.
And of course, when you listen to these conversations, make sure you're paying close attention to how native speakers use words in different contexts. That's one of the most valuable parts of listening. It's not just about hearing the word, it's about hearing how it's used in everyday speech. Whether it's in a casual chat, a professional discussion, or in business English conversations. This exposure will help you understand the word in a more comprehensive way.
Yes, Priya. And remember, vocabulary retention is all about repetition. The more you listen to words used in different contexts, the more likely you are to remember them. You're reinforcing the connection between the word and its meaning, which makes it easier to recall when you need to use it yourself.
Absolutely. So to sum it up, Use listening to English conversations as a tool to boost your vocabulary retention. Start with beginner-level conversations and podcasts, then gradually challenge yourself with more advanced content. Pay attention to how words are used and don't forget to practice speaking English fluently using those same words. This combination of listening and speaking will work wonders for your vocabulary and overall fluency.
Now, let's dive into one of the most important aspects of learning any language: speaking. While listening to English conversations helps you absorb new vocabulary, speaking regularly helps reinforce that vocabulary and solidify your learning. The more you practice speaking, the more natural it will feel when you actually need to use those words in a conversation.
That's right, Ryan. Speaking allows you to actively use the words you've learned, and that's key to remembering them. One of the best ways to practice speaking is by listening to podcasts for English pronunciation practice. You can repeat phrases or sentences from podcasts to match the correct pronunciation and intonation. This will help you speak English fluently and with confidence because you're hearing how native speakers pronounce words and sentences, then mimicking that.
Exactly. Repetition is essential here. The more you practice speaking, the better you get at recalling and using the new words you've learned. If you don't have someone to speak with, you can practice by repeating phrases or even having a conversation with yourself. It's about getting used to speaking English without hesitation.
And it's important to also focus on real-life English conversations. When you practice by talking about familiar topics or everyday situations, you're more likely to use the words and phrases in real-world settings. For example, you could practice by discussing your day, making small talk with someone, or even joining a language exchange group where you practice English with native speakers. This will give you more confidence and help you understand how to use vocabulary in different contexts.
Exactly, Priya. Another great way to reinforce your vocabulary is by using English conversation topics for beginners. Choose simple and relatable topics at first, like hobbies, daily routines, or travel. This way, you can easily practice using new words in the context of something familiar to you, which makes it easier to remember.
And remember, you don't have to be perfect when you speak. The goal is to practice regularly so that you can use those new words comfortably and confidently. Listening to English conversations can help you with pronunciation, while speaking regularly helps you apply what you've learned in real situations.
Yes, Priya. And don't forget that listening also plays a key role in improving English communication skills. Listening to how native speakers structure their sentences and use vocabulary will give you insights into the rhythm of the language. So, when you speak, you'll be able to speak English with confidence and sound more natural.
Exactly. So let's summarize this. To reinforce your vocabulary and become fluent in English, practice speaking as much as you can. Listen to English conversations for pronunciation practice, repeat what you hear, and use real-life English conversations to test out your vocabulary in real-world scenarios. The more you practice speaking and listening, the more improvement you'll see in your fluency and vocabulary retention.
Now that we've discussed the importance of speaking and listening, let's dive into how you can use new vocabulary in your daily life. One of the best ways to reinforce what you've learned is by using those new words in your daily English conversations. Whether you're talking to a friend, family member, or even a colleague, try to incorporate the words you've learned into your conversations.
Exactly. Using new words in real conversations helps make them feel more natural and solidifies their place in your memory. For example, if you've learned a new word like meticulous, you could try using it when talking about someone's attention to detail. The more you use the word, the more it becomes part of your vocabulary.
And it's not just about memorizing words, it's about integrating them into your thought process. Thinking in English makes it so much easier to recall words when you need them. If you are constantly translating from your native language to English, it can slow down your speaking and make it harder to remember vocabulary. But when you start thinking directly in English, those words will come to you more naturally.
Yes, Ryan. When you think in English, you're actively engaging with the language in your mind. This makes it easier to recall words in context, and it helps reinforce your learning. For example, if you're thinking about something you need to do for the day, try to describe it in English in your mind instead of your native language. This practice will help you use your vocabulary quickly and more fluently in conversation.
Right, Priya. So, make a habit of thinking in English during your daily activities. It could be something as simple as making a grocery list in English, or mentally describing what you see around you in English. By doing this regularly, you'll notice that your vocabulary recall becomes much quicker and more natural.
And don't worry if you make mistakes. The goal is not perfection, but improvement. Just keep using vocabulary in your daily life, and you'll see how much your language skills grow. The more you speak, the better your vocabulary will stick, and the more confident you'll feel.
Exactly. And remember, the more real-life English conversations you have, the easier it will be to recall words. So make it a point to use your new words as much as possible in daily interactions. Whether it's with friends, at work, or even talking to yourself, practicing regularly will keep those words fresh in your memory.
That's the key. Practice, practice, practice. Incorporate what you've learned into your daily English conversations, and soon enough, speaking with confidence and fluency will come naturally. Another excellent way to practice new words is through personal writing. Writing short stories, journal entries, or even just jotting down your thoughts using the new words you've learned can be incredibly effective. By doing this, you not only reinforce your vocabulary, but also make it a part of your personal expression.
That's a great point, Priya. When you write, you're giving yourself the opportunity to play with new words and experiment with how they fit into different contexts. Whether it's creating a short story or writing a letter, you'll start to notice how certain words can be used in various ways, which helps solidify their meaning.
Exactly. And the beauty of writing is that you can take your time to carefully select the words you want to use. This gives you a chance to focus on accurate vocabulary usage and understand the nuances of each word. Plus, you can always go back and review your writing, which is an excellent way to practice vocabulary retention over time.
Right. And it's a great way to improve writing fluency as well. The more you write, the more confident you'll feel about incorporating those new words into your speech too. You can even try keeping a vocabulary journal where you write down new words, their meanings, and example sentences. Over time, you'll build up a useful reference that you can look back on.
Definitely. And don't forget that writing in English also helps with thinking in English. When you're writing, you're actively engaging with the language, and that kind of practice will gradually help you become more fluent. Plus, it's a safe space to experiment without the pressure of speaking right away.
So whether it's a short journal entry about your day or a creative story using new vocabulary, personal writing is a fantastic tool to reinforce and expand your vocabulary. And the best part is, you get to do it at your own pace.
Exactly. And if you keep writing regularly, you'll start noticing how much easier it becomes to incorporate new words into your daily speech as well. It's a win-win. Practice vocabulary, build confidence, and become a more fluent English speaker over time.
Now, for advanced learners, one of the most powerful tools for expanding your vocabulary is reading. Whether it's books, articles, or any other form of written content, reading exposes you to a wide range of vocabulary. When you read books on diverse topics, you're likely to encounter advanced English vocabulary that you might not come across in everyday conversations.
That's right, Ryan. Reading not only helps you learn new words, but also provides context for them. The more you read, the more you'll naturally absorb advanced vocabulary, especially in various fields. This can significantly help you expand your vocabulary and improve your ability to express yourself in a more sophisticated way.
Exactly. And if you're trying to learn English for free, one of the best resources you can tap into is YouTube. There are countless channels that offer content on a variety of topics. By listening to these videos, you can expose yourself to real-life English conversations, which will introduce you to even more advanced vocabulary, while also giving you the opportunity to practice your listening and speaking skills.
Great point, Ryan. And as you encounter these words in books, articles, or videos, try using them in your daily conversations. This is how you'll expand your vocabulary and make it part of your active language skills. The more you read, the more comfortable you'll become with using these advanced words in your own speech.
Another area that plays a huge role in mastering vocabulary is pronunciation. When you work on your English accent and pronunciation, you become more confident in using new words. Often, learners struggle with remembering words just because they aren't sure how to say them, but once you master the pronunciation, the words tend to stick more easily.
Exactly. Mastering pronunciation makes it easier to remember words and use them correctly in conversations. The more familiar you become with the sounds of the words, the more confident you'll feel when you speak. And this confidence will help you incorporate new words into your everyday conversations much more naturally.
So to sum it up for our advanced learners, focus on reading widely, whether it's books or articles, to encounter advanced vocabulary. And don't forget the power of pronunciation. Mastering your English accent can make the vocabulary retention process a lot smoother.
Absolutely. And remember, the key to expanding your vocabulary is consistency. So make reading, listening, and speaking part of your daily routine, and you'll see great improvements over time.